Well, welcome back. Now, hashtag GovComSocial, a Decode Communications initiative that aims to guide government public sector communicators and also social media professionals through the complexity and the opportunities that come with using social media for citizen engagement, has released the third annual South African Government Leaders on Twitter report. Now, the report seeks to reflect on the presence and activity of cabinet members and their spokespeople on the microblogging app. And joining us in studio now to talk more about this is Decode Communications CEO Lorato Tsenkeng. Thanks so much for speaking to us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
And we were just talking off air that usually, Lorato, you would release this report in December, but there was a lot happening last December.
No, indeed. You know, when we're contemplating releasing the report, which we ordinarily, because the data is from December to December, and would release it just around the 20th of December. But of course, last year was a big year for the governing party, the African National Congress, and we thought that we will be competing with them, but also communicators tend to go away during that period. So we then thought that tactically, it would be better to release it when they are back and, they are getting ready for the new year.
So let's start by looking at the scope, for the report. Who exactly are we following and what exactly are we looking for?
Sure. So back in 2020, we were locked down early in the year, and of course, government had to use all available mechanisms to communicate with South Africans about the public health crisis, right? Of course, then the biggest thing that was coming up was the issue around misinformation and disinformation, and they had to use social media in particular to try and help people to rethink before sharing on their platforms, whether it was WhatsApp and the likes. And of course, then vaccination drive. We then started observing that while the press briefings are serving as a very good platform to connect with you as journalists and media professionals to project the messages out there, there seems not to be almost a proactive and a very engaging approach on social media. And we thought that, so if you looked at, the press conference themselves, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma was always topmost, communicating on, the issues around disaster management, South African Police Services Minister on compliance and the likes. And then we decided, let's look at the cabinet ministers in particular, their ministerial liaison officers, and the 9 premiers, and the MECs, and their spokespeople as well.
So let's start the cabinet. So we're talking about the 28 ministers in their portfolios, along with the president and deputy president, yes, which gives us 30.
Yes.
So of those 30, let's go to the top 10. Maybe starting with the number of followers, like which of those accounts are most followed by South Africans on Twitter. And I think we do have that graphic if we put it up. But let's just start at the top in terms of cabinet. Whose are the most followed accounts? There we have it.
Yeah, unsurprisingly, Minister Fikile Mbalula, Minister of Transport, leads the pack, with a 10% jump from 2021 to 2022. The president as well, doing relatively well. The other person, and many people have been asking, but how is it that Minister Gwede Mantashe is up there with the rest? Remember, Minister Gwede Mantashe for the longest time has been the national chairperson of the governing party, and when you look at his account, it projects a lot more messaging around the ANC rather than that of government, and hence that skew. Of course, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, she became the star of the moment during the pandemic in particular. You remember the Zol moment, right? And it became a big hit.
Zol.
Yeah, when people zone, right? And of course, Minister Lindiwe Sisulu, for a variety of reasons, whether it's hair sweeping, a video of hair sweeping, and you were talking earlier around the celebrity statusness that comes with politicians, and that's one of the observations. Of course, Patricia de Lille is the only non-ANC member that is in the cabinet, and of course, doing relatively well in terms of Twitter following as well.
And then Ronald Lamula,
yes,
Nathi Mthethwa, Stella Ndabeni-Abrams, and Dr. Blade Nzimande. They make up the top 10. Now, if we look around, and you spoke to some of them and the messaging, we're looking at them from a perspective of them being cabinet ministers. or members of cabinet in terms of the president, who's not necessarily a minister. But if we look at how they fared in terms of the messaging from a government perspective, how did it go for them?
So it's a mixed bag, right? So you have a Minister Fikile Mbalula who oftentimes is in the news, or at least, having relatively a lot of engagement for wrong reasons. Take the example, at the height of the Russia-Ukraine war, he then tweets that I've landed in Ukraine. That tweet landed him in a lot of hot water, a lot of people, taking him to task. Just later, as if he had not learned from that gaffe, there was the I've landed in Qatar moment when there was an accident on the N2 where kids were killed who were in a bakkie by a truck, right? And people felt that you being insensitive, you are the Minister of Transport, should be attending to this, dealing with this moment in a very sensitive way. Of course, kudos to him. If you compare 2020, 2021 and 2022, you'll also observe that he's not been engaging with a lot of Twitter wars. So 2020 and 2021, there were a lot of Twitter wars that he would engage in, right? And both with citizens and some with ANC members. You'd remember, a tiff that he had with Carl Niehaus at some point, right? They had an inner ete of some sort there. Of course, when you look at the president as an example, unfortunately, he just broadcasts his message, right? It's a one-way conversation. But we know that. SANEF has complained about that. Journalists have complained about that, to say the president almost does not want to talk, does not want to have a conversation and a dialogue. He almost wants to talk at people. So that
but it's obviously not the president communicating.
No, absolutely. But again, it's more, the president's men and women, saying, perhaps it's better for you just to broadcast the messaging. Juxtapose or compare and contrast him with a Paul Kagame. We know that a Paul Kagame does not operate his account, but go to his timeline now. He's also one of the most followed African leaders. He interacts and engages a lot with the citizens of Rwanda whenever they ask questions that pertain to the issues of the country. And that's something, that's an improvement that is required there. The last one that I want to really point out is, interestingly, while controversy and gimmicks seem to get people following, Minister Nathi Mthethwa is a different case. Minister Nathi Mthethwa, remember him about the flag that lights at night, that is educational, right? Interesting, his increase is not that great. But also, you remember one of the popular celebrities, Bona Mateba, has been decampaigning the minister a lot. Whenever she has a moment, she would always remind him to resign because he's not doing his job well. But of course, the sentiment as well on the ministry has not been that positive. And that is why, even if you look at you look at the increase both for the department, for the spokesperson herself, Maschaba Kumalo, and the minister, has not been that significant.
And let's take a look now at the cabinet portfolios, the cabinet accounts, and which of those are the most popular or have the greatest following on Twitter. So there they are, top 10.
Yes. And again, so the presidency, one of the things that helped them as well is that when President Ramaphosa walks into office in 2018, for the first time they establish, they appointed Kusela Diko as the head of the spokesperson of the president. Then they created a position, head of digital comms, that is led by Ms. Atigeleba. That helped a lot because just establishing that presence, it helped one getting the president in his personal or that personal account, and also the presidency's account. The one other interesting one, of course, is South African Police Services, and it's good that last year they breached the 1 million mark. Interestingly, the minister Begicele, he's one of the newsmakers of the year throughout for good and wrong reasons. He is not on Twitter though, but I think or at least our observation has been that the responsiveness of the ministerial spokesperson, Ms. Liranzu Themba, has also aided them. The incident that many of us will not forget in Krugersdorp when, there were young schoolgirls in uniform were apprehended by police people. Many people, instead of, worrying, they tagged the police, South African Police Services, and Liranzu Themba. And she was very responsive. And that has been, interesting. Of course, health, like I said, COVID-19 really helped them in terms of presence and visibility.
Interesting, making up that top 10, the rest of it, basic education, home affairs, finance. That's an interesting one. Labor and employment, DIRCO, COCTA, and transport. And I say finance is interesting because I wouldn't imagine they respond. Do they respond to anything?
Remember, finance, thankfully, at some point, they had one of the most interesting ministers in Tito Mboweni, right? Tito Mboweni is one of those who was very engaging on Twitter. He always had interesting tweets, even before he started the cooking business, right? So that created interest. And again, that has been the advantage where when the leader of government is interactive on social media, people tend to then follow his department because the expectation is that you communicate the messaging of government and the position of government. And that's the benefit that they had. Unfortunately, the current minister, Gonongwana, is not on Twitter. And it would be interesting when we observe 2023, because he was just appointed last year, to see how it's going to then go in terms of the growth thereof.
Well, Lerato, we have to leave it there. But thank you so much. Very interesting. And of course, if you want to go and look a little further into what's there, there's also the 10 most followed cabinet members spokesperson's account. Lerato just touched on some of them. There they are. And you can see there at the top, Maschaba Kumalo, and running down some that you've touched on. But this and of course more you can actually go and access. The report is there on a Decode Communications feed, so please go there, and you can also see some of the most influential stories, and they also ranked a lot to really sink your teeth into. So do go and have a read if you want to see more on that. And that was Decode Communications CEO Lerato Tsenkeng speaking to us here about the 3rd annual South African Government Leaders on Twitter report.